Welcome to Schmidt List, a podcast on innovation, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Join host Kurt Schmidt, president of Foundry, as he and his guest share valuable insights and strategies. This is the perfect opportunity to explore fresh ideas to improve yourself and your business. Come join Kurt as he interviews this week's inspiring guest.
Hey everyone, before we jump into the show, I just wanted to share this important message with all of you. As an agency leader, it likely often crosses your mind. Out of the million things I could be doing, what should I be focused on right now? When you're busy putting out daily fires, you easily get sucked into the weeds. And when the work lightens up, you're scrambling to find the projects to keep your team billable. But why enter 2024 just hoping that you'll thrive? On November 8th, Parallax is hosting a webinar featuring founder and CEO Tom O'Neill. Having built and scaled The Nerdery, a digital software agency, to 500 employees and $85 million in revenue, Tom is sharing practical habits to give you the focus and confidence to crush it in the year to come. I've had the pleasure of working with Tom in the past, and with his extensive background in agency scaling, he possesses the unparalleled expertise and experience to teach and guide others. So I strongly suggest you don't miss this webinar. Learn more and sign up for the free webinar at getparallax.com or via the link below in the show notes. And now, back to the show. Dane, how are you doing today?
I'm great, Kurt. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, of course. Thank you for joining. So tell me about the work you do and who do you usually work with?
Yeah, you bet. So I've been lucky in my life. I fell into recruiting at about 19. So I get to work with all sorts of companies. Back in the early days, it was small professional service firms, then large oil and gas companies, major projects around the world. But really the core of what we do now is staffing into major process industry environments. We have a software business that provides applicant tracking software to help companies find talent to hire and onboard that talent. And we have an executive search and coaching practice as well. So just can't have enough fun working with lots of different teams.
That's great. Well, and so with your experience with dealing with such a diverse group of folks, some of the things that you're doing, you're bringing in new staff into new environments and trying to build unified teams and things around this, right? And so
yeah,
I'm guessing the whole idea of like how people work together has been central to a lot of the work you do.
Yeah, career long. And even before I started work, like playing sports.
Oh, sure.
I've always found that if you're on the right team with a good group of people that have some shared vision and purpose, that you can have a lot of impact and enjoy it along the way.
Yeah, well, I love that you brought up shared vision because that seems to be something people struggle with. And now because of the pandemic, we're doing more remote, right? Especially because I know you do a lot of work with knowledge-based workers, right?
Yeah.
So those people are not necessarily having to swing a hammer as much. And so they can work anywhere. So this whole idea of how do we build teams now in these hybrid, remote, in-person things? One of the first things I usually tell the leaders I talk to is like, it wasn't much easier when we were all in person either. So, I know you've got these sort of rose-colored glasses of the past, but just because you got everybody in a room did not mean they all of a sudden got along or understood each other either, right? So tell me from your perspective, what have you seen? What are some of the biggest impacts have been with the hybrid environment and just your perspective on it? Yeah.
It's been a busy time for teams the last few years, even pre-pandemic, just seeing what technology was doing to the way we work together. And if I'm honest, I would say I agree with your point, which is that the past wasn't any easier, but maybe it was a little less busy. Like we've thrown so many tools into the mix. We're now trying to address a lot of topics that businesses didn't previously talk about, whether it's diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, whether it's corporate social responsibility, environment, social governance. There's just so much now that we as business leaders and team leaders are having to bring into the conversation every day, on top of how we do the work and what our customers expect of us. So it's an interesting time. There's lots of really good tools, but it's also easy to get distracted and trigger happy by throwing I guess a festival of new stuff and forgetting how to do the basic things well.
Yeah. Yep. Right. But where do I go to start learning these new tools and these things? Do I go to YouTube? What advice are you giving leaders these days on how to change their working style to match what people's expectations are? What resources are there?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I actually started my own podcast, The Future of Teamwork, to start exploring just that question.
A really good podcast. If you're listening out there, go and check it out. It's great. The Future of Teamwork.
No, thanks, Kurt. And I enjoyed having you on as a guest.
I appreciate
too.
that.
But I started to explore that because there isn't one obvious place to go. And the more I understand what some of our customers are doing and some of our partners are doing, it actually comes back to going to your people on your team. I think that's the first place to start, because you can go out and pay a great consultancy to come in. You can go on to Software Advice and look at what tools other companies in your segment use. But more often than not, your team who are doing the work day to day are going to have a sense of what they see out there in the market, or what they see their customers using, or what they see their vendors using, or what they see friends using down the road in different businesses. So I think starting with your team's probably the best place. And if you start there, you want to sort of back up a little bit. You want to say, well, what's the problem we're trying to solve as a team today? Because we could solve 100 different problems, but it may not move the needle. So you get your team together and you ask them, what's going to create the biggest impact to your job satisfaction, productivity, creativity, and go from there. That's what I'm learning through many hours of failed initiatives.
Yeah, sure. Well, would you say, so because one of the challenges I've had over the years is managing teams that don't want to be managed, or they're very different individuals on the team. Some want very active management, some want hands-off management. And so as a manager, I've seen people sort of make the choice of like, well, it's hard because I've got so many people on the team. I have to change my management style to one way or the other. So I'm just going to make the difference. I'm going to make the choice to be hands off, or I'm going to make the choice to be really hands on. And I'm going to annoy half of the people no matter what I do, or things like that. So tell me, Dave, from your experience, how do you manage people that don't want to be managed in a team setting? How does that work?
If I nail that, I won't need to have a day job anymore.
I was going to say, give me your perspective then.
Yeah, I'll give you my perspective.
Okay.
I mean, the reality is there's been a lot of talk around, people getting purpose from their work and being tied in to the team and being excited about serving customers. But there's still a huge percentage of people that turn up to work because it's necessary and it pays the bills. And
100%.
And that's fair. And you can't force everyone to get excited about your vision as a leader. So I think my approach, not necessarily my answer, is to get in with teams and understand, very pragmatically, how do you want to be managed? And what is it that you're excited about doing or being a part of? Now, you can't always serve that individual's wants, but at least if you can start to think, well, hey, Jenny, the reality is that in your job, I need you to do this. But the next best thing I can do to create a little bit more access to you dealing with community relations or whatever's important to you is I can create a stretch project. I can create something for you to start doing with us or with the other team. I think that's one place to go. And the reality is that at least if you show your employees that where the business allows and the team and the culture allows, that you're going to work with them to, unlock something that is more aligned with their passion and where they get their real energy from, you've got a chance. But there is no one size fits all management practice anymore. In fact, I think that was a big problem in the past. We tried to go down to lowest common denominators all too often.
Yeah, for sure. Well, back in the IBM, the Jack Welch sort of approach to executive management and leadership is very command and control, right? But again, we're taught command and control as we go to we go to elementary school, middle school, high school, where they are set up as very command and control. They're not.
Yeah.
And then they come out and especially in the knowledge-based world, we're seeing more and more people asking for more iterative, more agile sort of approaches to things. But that's not how we were brought up necessarily as a way to work. And so it can be challenging, right?
Yeah, totally. Actually, I enjoyed listening to one of your podcasts on agile because I'm not very familiar with it. I'm not a software guy. And it gave me a lot of context. And then I spoke to a gentleman by the name of John Boudreau, who talks about the fragmentation, disaggregation of work. And he talked about the importance of maybe HR professionals and leaders thinking about their talent in an agile way and bringing some of those practices in. So to your point, we're having to break down the way we've traditionally created work, designed work, built roles, hired talent, managed talent, and rethink it. And I think a key point, which I love that you brought up school, because school doesn't prepare people for the real world. It gives them some basic learning, it gives them some basic social skills, and it keeps them somewhere safe while mom and dad are at work in many cases. Right. So the reality is that we're now, I think, entering a time where project-based learning is going to become much more critical for education pathways, for early career, for late career, for reskilling, upskilling. And what's important there is that when you're building these project-based learning environments or opportunities, we kind of invite the inner child. Let's think about who that individual was before they became, normalized through the school process, and give them some time to play, because we all take ourselves a little bit too seriously in business, and there's so much that we do that isn't that special. And I think some of the guests I've had on my podcast have really begun opening my eyes to, giving people a chance, some agency to throw some ideas out there and let ideas get better rather than always be focused on execution.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up, because I think one of the things that I've learned, especially working with teams, let's say it's a team of directors, and you've got a director of marketing, a director of finance, a director of sales, and you want these people to be working as a team. They all have different goals. They have different sizes of teams. They have different processes. They have different outlooks. Everything about them in your organization is different, except for their title is director. Yep. So if you look at a sheet, they're all in a line. So you would think all these directors will work together. And what I've found is that it can be extremely challenging to get all those folks to work together towards a common goal, because they are already full up with a full-time job trying to achieve the common goal in the silo that they have, right? And so tell me, Dane, from your experience or your opinion, if I was a leader and I had a group like that, and I wanted them to work more closely together, but I also don't want to distract them from their main goals.
Yeah.
What are some things I could be doing to help that team work together better?
Yeah. So again, what we're finding through some of the guests we talked to, and even some of the projects that we're running in our team, is interesting. And you use the word main goals. I actually think that's where you've got to start. You've got to break down the muscle memory, because the problem for all leaders in all businesses that are at scale is you're always going to have departmental friction. You're going to have your way of coming in and doing business. And so if you don't go and initially start by creating space to break some of that initial muscle memory, then you're never going to create the opportunity, the shared incentive, and the alignment for those teams to work better. And so to me, that's one of leadership's biggest roles today, is get in there, break down a little bit of that muscle memory, create space for your team, and help remove the friction. You can't create for them the reason to work together. You can't create the excitement and the motivations, but the honest truth is if you give them space, they'll find it. In most cases, I think they'll find it. So It's a matter of actually being bold and brave enough to create some time and start tearing stuff down that works, because most of what we've built is designed to continue the status quo. So it creates inertia.
Yeah, makes sense. And from your experience, Dane, one of the other challenges that I see people have is that I'm a leader and I've hired very smart people to do work.
Yeah.
Okay. But I see that maybe they are not aligned necessarily to the overall vision of where I think things should go and what they should be doing. And so my first instinct maybe as a leader is to ask them to go and solve that problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, and most times, I'm going to just say, I am frustrated that they don't just solve the problem. So I'm stuck because I'm like, well, I hired all these smart people and I want them to do this thing, but they're not doing it. And so I sit there and I could be waiting, or I could have little moments of explosions why I'm frustrated or whatever. What's your advice to that leader, Dane?
Yeah, the tough advice, which I've learned too many times, I didn't learn it first or second time, is that you've got to have a rough conversation with that individual, and they probably might not be set for the team. The challenge, the higher you move up and the more talented an individual you hire, is that if that individual doesn't come in and quickly align, then they're probably not going to be right for the team. It's going to be hugely disruptive. And sometimes you want to invite that disruption in because they might see something that you don't. But if there isn't a generation of traction with the team, with the customer, with the new product being developed quickly that people start to learn from and align with, I think you have to go back to as a leader, you have to go back to your vision. You need to go back to your culture and values, and you need to say, is this person aligned? And if they're not aligned because you failed to give them the clarity of what's expected, then you have the tough conversation. And if they're not aligned because you've given them the clarity and they don't want to align, then you need to free them to go and do their best work with a team where they're going to be more valuable and have more impact.
Yeah, I love that advice, because I think one of the first things you obviously have to do is hold up the mirror. Have I communicated well what my actual goals are and what the outcomes I'm expecting are, before I task them to go and try and achieve these things? Because maybe I wasn't clear. Maybe I need to be more clear. Maybe I need to ask them what clarity looks like to them.
Yep.
Right. Yep. And then build from that, because my version of clarity might not be the same as theirs, right?
No.
We have that bias, right? Like, I came up with the vision, I came up with the idea, so I should be, since I'm smart enough to do that, I should be smart enough to communicate it, right, Dane?
Yeah, in theory, but the reality is it never works that way. The reality is that vision and shared objectives, I like to look at it at 3 levels. A lot of teams don't have it, full stop. They're just operating because they think that's what is expected of them. Sadly, it's just the truth. Then you get a lot of teams where it's the leader's vision, strategy, clarity, but it isn't truly shared from an understanding standpoint across the team. And if you truly get shared clarity, which I think builds shared leadership, shared accountability, it's a great team if you start to achieve that. Then it means that each of those individuals had some level of input. Maybe they didn't craft the exact destination that you're going to or the metrics, but they at least started to talk about how you're going to get there and what it's going to feel like in the way that you do the work. I think that's really going to be the answer most of the time.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah. And as a leader, I think it's really important that you understand that it's okay. That getting clarity on vision does not necessarily mean buy-in. Like, sometimes you just have to people to say, I'm going to disagree and I'm going to commit. Yeah. And that's okay, because in certain, is my point, is that if maybe you've identified in your business that productivity in the engineering or production side of things needs to go up, and sales is like, well, we should be spending more time on sales initiatives, right?
Yeah.
And they argue against making that part of the initial direction. You need them to understand why it's important and why you are committing to this, and that it is okay for them to say, I don't agree with that direction, but I'm going to commit to help make it successful. And you need to have an intentional conversation about that. You can't just make assumptions.
No, I think that's a great point. So it's okay to disagree and commit. Just to play back, I think that's powerful. A good example might be I'm running a recruiting business and I take all of my recruiters off the phones and the emails from talking to their customers and their candidates. And I say, guys, for the next 3 days, I need you in learning data analytics and digital marketing. Because the reality is customers don't pick up the phones the way that they used to when I started in the industry. And we all need to be totally. So we all need to be better at like digital engagement of our candidate base and our hiring managers that we're servicing. And a lot of those people are going to say, this is ridiculous. You're taking me out of 3 days of productivity. Why don't you hire someone to do that for us and just give us the people to speak to? But sometimes that's the hard decision of changing a team's capabilities and competencies based on where you see the market going.
Yeah. I just had this conversation, and I've been doing a lot of this work with leaders, especially with their leadership team, or maybe even some of their sales and account teams. Is the leaders are seeing like the power of like LinkedIn, for example, in getting attention for their businesses and their values and all these things. Yeah. And so they're asking like the other executives on the teams to go in and start engaging. And they're like, I don't see any value in this. I've never seen any value in this. I don't want to go. I'm not Mr. Beast here. I'm not going to go and like make videos every day. And the salespeople might be doing the same thing. I've got my jam. Like I don't need to go and do these things. That's silly. And it's whatever. I don't know, whatever else people come up with, but the world has changed.
The world has changed. I would like to be Mr. Beast, by the way. That's like success way off the charts.
Right.
But the point that you raise is a good one, which is that the world has changed. And if you bring that back to teams, forget the wider corporation for a moment. Individuals leave managers. That's the big buzz phrase right now out there in the world. But also individuals join managers. So I'm even seeing now that the best leaders, the ones who are building the best teams and growing those teams, are out there building a profile in public, not just for who the future talent might be, but for their customers who might be engaging with their team, and even for their existing team members. Because when you're remote and you can't bounce into someone at a happy hour or in the break room or wherever on the bus to work, what you're sharing publicly, whether it's on a podcast or LinkedIn or on an internal SharePoint video, it's currency. It's allowing people to understand who you are, what you stand for, where you're trying to drive the team. So I think everyone needs to get pretty uncomfortable in the next few years.
Yeah, I agree. Again, it doesn't mean trying to be something you're not. It means to be more of who you are, because that's what attracts people, right? It's just amplifying it a bit, right? But if you look, and again, if you were to take the coveted sort of, at least from a brand perspective, of the 17 to 25-year-olds, right? Which is a very influential group. They spend more time on TikTok than Disney, Netflix, cable TV, and Hulu and all these put together.
Yeah.
On this one platform. So if you don't think things have changed, like to your point, Dane, just wait around a little bit. You'll get the rug pulled out from underneath you. And the way that LinkedIn has changed over the years, right? Because you and I both know LinkedIn gets 80% of their revenue from recruiters. That's the majority of their benefit, right? But there's 900 million people on the platform worldwide, which is like it's almost 1 billion people on this platform. And the statistics show about 1% post about once a week of those people. So it's this, and it still has an algorithm that pushes popular things to the top of the feed.
Yeah.
So it is prime for this attention sort of space that you want to be in, whether you're a leader trying to show off how great your business and your team is.
Yeah.
Or if you're an employee trying to show off And you don't have to do what everybody goes to these extremes when I bring this up with them, right? They're like, well, I'm not going to post. I see what these other idiots are doing on there and I don't want to do that. I'm like, you don't have to do you don't have to
do you, like, whatever I like what you said earlier, you bring more of yourself to that platform.
Exactly. Right. It's just putting a little bit more of shine a light on what you already good at and what you already do. But I do find that, especially here in the Midwest where I'm at, people have a hard time taking credit for their work just in general. So asking them to take a little bit more credit, right, is challenging and difficult.
It's a shift.
I get it. It's a shift, right?
But I take people back to the play, right? Sadly, for all the work that I do with brilliant guests on the podcast, when I put a post out on the podcast, I might get, a couple of thousand, maybe 5,000 impressions, and some great comments. And that's a good level of engagement. If I put a shark suit on or dress up as a leprechaun on St. Patrick's Day, I'm getting like 10,000 plus. Like,
sure.
So you can play with it and bring yourself. Yeah. You don't always have to be super ethereal or academic. And I think what's fun about that is it's the beginning of this shift towards vulnerability and authenticity, which I think all leaders need too, because the world that we live in now, teams don't look to us for having all the knowledge that makes their job easier. We're way past that. Teams now look to us as leaders for, is this someone who I can be honest with, who I can ask for help, who I can be excited about working for? So it's a very different subconscious dialogue that's going on there as a leader with you and your teams and even externally.
Well, that's the thing I tell people, because the idea of promoting, doing a little bit of promotion, self-promotion on social media is not just about the business, but it is, like you said, it's about sharing your values and showing who you are as a person a bit. So when people are searching out who should I work with and who should I work for, I would be much more attracted to somebody that I got to know a little bit ahead of time. And at least, again, back to, I don't care, people put negative spins on it, right? Like virtue signaling and politics and things. But again, it's just being who you already are. It's not like pretending to be somebody else. And I get it. It can be uncomfortable for people. And there's lots of different other mediums other than just posting videos to LinkedIn. There's writing articles. There's all sorts of different ways. You can just be a commenter on posts and share your values and ideas. You don't have to necessarily start a YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, 100%. There's so many different ways to get engaged. It could even be on executive forums, just sharing with peers. I mean, there's so many different ways to engage thanks to the digital world. Yeah.
So a lot of people are asking, a lot of companies are asking people to come back to the office, Dane. So one of the last questions I want to ask you about is, what's your perspective and your take on the idea of either forcing, incentivizing, or whatever people to come back to offices? And then do you have an opinion? What would you tell a leader these days of like, should I just get everybody to come back? Should I make them hybrid? What are your thoughts right now? And then what do you see happening over the next year?
I mean, I'm all about hybrid. I think there's a study that one of our guests on the podcast shared that said people who are 5 days a week are feeling punished, whether they're at home or in the office. So there's no win-win. There are always going to be people who have to work remotely 5 days a week because of they need to care for family or they're living in a really remote location. But the reality is, I think 3 days is ideal. And if you can get 4 days in a way that isn't a stretch for your team or for your customers, even better.
Yeah, makes sense. I think that you just have to embrace what your most talented people are going to get you, because people are like, well, I don't know if they're getting work done. And I'm like, that means you're a bad manager.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they are bad employees.
Yeah.
If especially, again, they're not swinging hammers here. These are knowledge-based workers. Right? They're in front of computers. there is ways to know if they're working or not. And I don't mean from like a big brother sort of, I'm tracking your movements and whatever sort of thing. Like if you are managing them correctly, you know they are getting things done or not getting things done. And
I agree.
And so what I've seen is that the pandemic has shown a big spotlight on terrible management because
and there's a lot of them.
Yeah, there is. And it's these people that, again, I'm not saying like there's not value in coming in the office. I think it's really important, especially for young people, to have a place where they are having those so-called water cooler or whatever talks, because when I was younger, I mean, this is where people made friends, met colleagues, even met their future husbands or wives sometimes.
Yep.
Right? So I think there is value there, especially for people in a younger generation and newer to work in general, like less experienced people.
I hear you on that. And they're calling it the Zoom ceiling. If you're early in your career and you're not having interaction with colleagues and learning, then you kind of start to cap out.
Right.
But I also challenge listeners to think about the other end, the really experienced talent who it's easy to say, hey, I love them, I trust them, I know their work product, they can work from home 5 days a week. But let's be honest, those individuals are key cultural contributors. They bring a lot of technical knowledge that we need to share in the team. And nothing lasts forever. Like the world's so fast changing right now. Some of those individuals are going to need to reskill, upskill, retrain, retool, whatever you want to call it, before they're ready to retire and before your business believes is necessary. I think that's the reality. So I think that's where bringing people back and not managing through walking around, which is not what we want to do because it's not about managing their work product. It's managing through creating these projects. It's managing through working together, breaking down some of those muscle memories, trying new stuff. I think those teams are going to build great culture, great energy.
I totally agree.
Innovation and impact follow.
I think that's great. Well, Dane, I could talk to you all day, but you'll definitely have to come back on a future episode to talk more. If I want to get in touch with you and find out more about the work you folks do, where do I connect with you? How do I find you?
I mean, LinkedIn's the easiest place to find me personally, Dane Grunewald. There's a small kangaroo in between my name. The Future of Teamwork has its page and we're putting out posts every Tuesday, shows every Tuesday. So absolutely follow, subscribe, tune into that. And Huddle 3 Group, which is where I'm the group CEO and founding partner. You'll also find there my email's dane@huddle3.group.
That's great. Dane, again, I appreciate the work you do. If you haven't listened to Dane's podcast, I'll have links in the description to Dane and all the things around that. I strongly suggest if you're a manager, you're managing people, you're building teams, it's a fantastic show. Go and check it out. Dane, thank you again for your time today.
Thanks, Kurt. It's been a blast.
We appreciate you taking the time to listen to this episode of Schmidt List. The stories shared by our guests are genuinely inspiring and offer insightful knowledge. It's important to remember that success doesn't happen overnight and requires collaboration, learning, and perseverance. If you want to broaden your professional connections, check out Kurt's book, The Little Book of Networking: How to Build Your Career One Conversation at a Time, on Amazon. Please stay connected with all things Schmidt List on social media, leave a review for the podcast, and join our community of like-minded entrepreneurs. Thank you for being part of Schmidt List. Keep innovating, collaborating, and chasing your entrepreneurial dreams.